best friends, Patrick Henningsen, host of Sunday Wire, commentary extraordinaire, and you want to check him out at patrickhenningsen.substack.com. Always great stuff there. Patrick, hello.
It's great to be with you, Gary.
I'm going to spring something on you a little bit later in the show. Believe it or not, Zelensky, he thinks he's got a silver bullet. He thinks he's got a silver bullet. Wait till you hear what it is. But we'll get there in a minute. I just wanted to give you a heads up that that's what we're going to be looking forward to.
Okay.
So listen, what do you think? Are there going to be talks, Danny, between Putin and Trump?
It doesn't look like it. Looks like there were rumors. There was a soft confirmation, and all of a sudden we're now told that there's not going to be.
Right, back and forth.
Back and forth.
Crazy, right? Back and forth. Everybody denying, not denying. Oh, it's on, it's not on, right?
Could be. I mean, as far as the Trump administration goes, it could change on by Friday, and then could flip again on Monday. I think Russia's always have an open door policy. They always have an open door policy. The problem is not Russia. The problem is the United States. And there's this bit of a tussle between the Zelensky regime and Trump at the moment. When Zelensky was over in Washington, you might have noticed that leak about him getting a spanking from from Donald, but
behind
it was
closed doors.
Behind closed doors. And then there's what's more interesting, however, is the leak, and why that was leaked. Was this all choreographed? That's a legit question at this point. But let's say that it wasn't choreographed, and that leak, you'd think it would be somebody on from the Trump camp leaking it to show that Zelensky's in the bad books. It's actually probably the other way around, and it would be sending a signal to the Europeans that Trump has got cold feet on, pushing this proxy war ahead, and that they need to sort of increase their efforts to sort of get the war back on track. Mm-hmm. So that's more likely, in my opinion, what the leak was. It was designed to send a signal to the Europeans, the British mainly, the most hawkish being the British, of course, and the Germans. To say, they need to double up their efforts, which are to, stage provocations in Crimea, maybe false flags in Moldova, Transnistria, or hitting targets within Russia, etc. Some gallant raid or some operation that will sort of turn the tide, or just to sort of pine for more weapons. Because there's other wonder weapons in the pipeline. Apparently, there's all sorts of talk right now about this system or that system. There's a new one. I think they said this could change the tide of the war. I have to go sort of reacquaint myself with that. But I saw something breaking recently like that. But it nonetheless, like the F-16s before, there's always something. It was the Tomahawks last week, the last 2 weeks. That's not confirmed and problematic, because there was also another leak. It wasn't a leak, but I believe it's one of the news agencies spoke to a NATO representative at the summit, and they said that no Ukrainian military personnel will not be trained to deploy Tomahawks in Ukraine. It would be U.S. personnel and staff.
That was stated that specifically.
Yes, and that was from a NATO source. This is a mainstream reporting. And so what does that mean? That's quite consequential, because that was a red line for the Russian Federation, which is that they would regard the United States actively involved in deploying these weapons as a red line. It would be seen as U.S. involvement, and this would definitely escalate things to another level. And we have that confirmation from the NATO summit. So, I mean, and I think that kind of hurt the whole Tomahawk public relations splash, if you noticed. And, but I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but I personally don't think the Tomahawks are a great system. The last time Trump used them in Syria in his first term, I think 22 out of 26 were shot down by Syrian anti-aircraft, which are, at best S-200s and Buks. I think we spoke about this with Daniel in a previous broadcast, but
not a promising ratio.
And they're not going to get the latest version. It's just not going to happen.
Right.
It's risky. That's hugely risky for the United States to potentially divulge that technology and the systems if there is a misfire or if it doesn't explode. And that happens with Tomahawk cruise missiles.
Yeah.
That happened in Syria. There's photographic evidence of some of them that basically were ditched into a farm field, fully intact, practically. So it'd be very easy to reverse engineer whatever the guidance systems are and so forth. Right. In fact, those probably went straight to Moscow, those ones from Syria. That was in 2018. And in 2017, they used them as well, I think, is a response to the alleged chemical weapons attacks in Khan Shaykhun in April 2017. And then again, for the Duma alleged chemical weapons Assad attack, which was totally debunked, by the way. Both of those were debunked, but especially the 2018 one, debunked by whistleblowers from the OPCW. WikiLeaks ran with that as well. And our colleague Piers Robinson, who's a great journalist, runs a Propaganda in Focus website. His study team also debunked that thoroughly. But again, those were Tomahawks, not great, and that's the antiquated Syrian air defense. What do you think Russia would do to slow-moving Tomahawk missiles? I mean, unless the U.S. could fire 200 of them from Ukraine, but does the U.S. have 200? Do they even have 50 that they could deploy? I don't think so.
Yeah, we'll get into that too, as a matter of fact. Let me, I saw something promising over the weekend with Trump making a bit of a concession here. He was saying, I think Ukraine, with the support of the European Union, is in a position to fight and win all of Ukraine back in its original form.
Yeah.
But now, right, you got to admit, he's singing a different song here.
He not only said all of Ukraine, he said, and then some.
Oh, yeah, right, exactly, right. Why stop there? With time and patience, the financial support of Europe, in particular NATO, the original borders from where his war started, is very much an option. Why not?
No, I don't think so. That's not going to happen. That's the opposite of the situation on the ground. Ukraine's about to lose all of their footing in Donetsk, the Donetsk Oblast, which is part of the Russian Federation now. And he's insinuating that they're going to somehow take Crimea back. That's not going to happen. Right. So it's, Donald Trump himself doesn't really understand the geography. He doesn't understand the situation on the ground clearly. He's only really as good when he makes this public statement as whoever is in his ear. And he's got some of the most unqualified people shooting at the hip around him. And they might sound credible to him and maybe to Fox News or One America News or something like that. But you can tell by what Trump's constantly flip-flopping. Well, yeah. And he's never specific because he doesn't know the specifics. But he's trying to BS. He BS's his way through every interview and every sort of public statement. He's not running his true social account. Someone else is running it, and they're just basically translating more or less the sentiment of what his words are and then adding some affectations to it. So
agreed. You know what else though, Patrick? I think he is he has a real affection and love for trial balloons. And I think, yes. he does that. He and his team, I'm not saying him alone, do that. And, they're happy to float in either direction once they see how it's responding. I think that's the other part of what the thinking is behind the administration as to what they're trying to pull off.
Yeah, you're right. Very well put, Gary. He's a master of media management, and he believes in his position he can throw the trial balloons out, check what the public temperature is, check what the Washington temperature is, see if there's any pushback across the aisle, and also check internationally what the reaction might be. But, this is a fool's errand. If you're clever, and he can master the news cycle in this way with the U.S. domestic audience, and it does work on this sort of supine, vassalized, which is some of the weakest and most unpopular European leaders in the history of the continent, probably in the modern nation state era, going back 300 or 400 years. So it's okay with them. They're more or less kowtowing to Washington on that, but for Russia and any other serious global players, they're definitely it's not going to have any effect. And so if he used that sparingly, then it would be effective. But the fact he does that every week or multiple times in a week, the administration is spinning its wheels in the mud right now. And then what they're doing also is flinging some of that mud on anybody that is pushing back on them or doesn't want to align with their ideas or policies, and making more enemies by the day, by the week.
Wow, just to hammer home exactly what you just said, to reinforce. Here's Lavrov just yesterday. So succinctly, he's singing, unlike Trump, who sings a different song as the days go by. They've been singing this song ever since the beginning. You wonder, it's almost like they're talking past one another. He couldn't be more clear. You think he'd just throw his hands up in the air and say, I'm done with this. How many times do I have to say this to you? Are you not listening? Just trying to be very composed and putting it out there again. And just what you were saying, their seriousness, they've been so clear.
With a problem in Washington, and this was the same under Biden, it was slightly better because there were some people in the Biden administration that had their own reputations to consider in their future and so forth. These were like more seasoned foreign policy, even though they made absolute balls up in a debacle in the Middle East and Ukraine. Yeah. They even had certain limitations as to how much lying they could do, or how much of this sort of imaginary geopolitical assessments you could get away with. But under Trump, you really don't have anybody with any real reputation and really any real pedigree. You've got property developers, you've got friends of Trump, you've got other national security grifters and Fox News pundits and things like that. It's not a serious group of people. And the result of this, similar to the Biden administration, is you have a situation in Washington where you can't tell the truth because that's career suicide. To give an honest assessment of the situation will be the end of your tenure in this cabinet. And if you go against Trump publicly, you're finished. And not only that, he will tweet and say something nasty about you and kick you on the way out. But worse than that, so they're in a bizarre way. This is kind of Washington's turned Soviet-esque, or it's like the Reich. Everybody's afraid to tell. Sorry, it's an extreme analogy, but everyone's terrified to tell the Fuhrer what the true situation on the Eastern Front was. You see, so they just spin lies, and then the press spin the lies back. It feeds back into the political system. And so what everybody believes in Washington is pretty much a lie. And I can tell you for certain that's the same in Europe. That's the same in the UK. And I've spoke to active duty and also veterans in the forces in America, Britain, and Europe. Not as much in Europe. A few I've spoken to, and I was pleasantly surprised, by the way, with NATO member states, with their sort of even-handed analysis. But for Britain and the U.S., people believe that Russia's lost millions of men, that the Russian economy is on its last legs, that the Russian army can't fight, that Russia's conscripting 60-year-old men. Yeah. I mean, that's active duty. Active duty. So if that's what they believe, then they're briefing the politicians, and the politicians are telling the press. So you have the whole ecosystem where nobody is knowing or understands or can even even actualize the real situation in Ukraine, and they're building policy and making decisions and building alleged frameworks for negotiations based on total fantasy, lies, false assumptions, and they wonder why the negotiations aren't going anywhere. That's a divorce from the fact that they can't articulate the actual history of how we got to this moment in time from the Maidan in February 2014 forward. Now, I can do that. A number of my colleagues can do that. There are a few honest journalists out there, very few. We can do that. Ray McGovern and some of these people, and people you have on your show, and people on Judge Napolitano's show, they can do this. We can all tell you chapter and verse, everything that happened from Petro Poroshenko's tenure as president right through to the present day, and then we can articulate the Minsk peace process. We can talk about UN Resolution 2202, which the UN voted anonymously on the Security Council to implement the Minsk peace process, and that broke down, and that's the reason why things then spiraled out of control, and that's why Russia mounted a massive humanitarian intervention to deal with what Sergei Lavrov just told you in that clip.
Exactly. And
so
Putin's
this
made
isn't
that
like,
clear.
but what I told you there, Gary, that will be called Russian disinformation.
Yeah.
By all of our mainstream hacks, by the governments in the U.S., in Britain, and in Europe, and that's why they censor RT. And the URLs are blocked for all Russian media right across Europe and the UK. They will not allow us as a public to read any official statements from the Russian Federation in the English language media, because they say it's Russian propaganda, even though they cannot point to any article that's not factual on those websites. And I'm sorry to say, you might not like it, you might not like Russia, but what they print on RT.com is factual. And you don't like the statements of Lavrov or Putin, or you don't like the battlefield reports, then you have to come up with a counter argument. But censoring it all means that our politicians can't read what they're saying in Russia. They can't compare the data with the Russians, and that's why we are in the situation we're in.
Yeah.
It's an iron curtain has dropped, Gary.
It's crazy.
An iron curtain has dropped, and we are on the wrong side of this new iron curtain. That's what's happening.
Patrick, that's exactly why Danny and I have always wanted, as much as possible, to play Lavrov, to play Putin. We're going to play Zelensky in a second, so people can hear for themselves what are they saying, because you don't hear that in the mainstream media. When's the last time any of the legacy media has played a quote, a soundbite? From either from Zelensky, of course they do, but from Putin or from Lavrov, you never see them on the legacy media.
Never. You have to listen. If you are negotiating or you're a congressman, you're on all these committees, right? Intelligence committee, etc., foreign affairs. You don't know what the Russian position is.
Right. Exactly.
You don't know what the official position is or policy, and you don't know what they're saying at any given moment. You talk to Alistair Crook or some of these seasoned diplomats. It's their job to know everything that's happening on the other side, and that's the same with every senator and every U.S. Representative that is in any way involved in any national security committee or any defense or foreign policy. They must be accurately briefed, and most people these days, politicians will somewhat brief themselves by following certain news outlets and reading for 1 hour a day or whatever they tend to do. They do get briefing sheets. Unfortunately, most of their briefing sheets are bullet points from IPAC right now. But think tanks and lobbyists will drop the memos on and give them to their chief aides and so forth, and then the chief aides will then regurgitate that to the representative or the senator, so that they're well briefed when they go to committee or they go to make statements or discuss policy publicly, or even in closed door sessions. They need to be well informed. That's not happening right now in Washington. It's not. And the reason I know it's not, because I've listened to all of these people for the last 2 or 3 years, and they know nothing. They clearly know nothing. Or they're not saying what they know because they're afraid of getting, ostracized or attacked in the media. But I doubt it. There's no nuance. There's no accurate data points, and that's the reason why there will be no progress in any negotiations with the Trump administration and Russia. Zero. It's not going to happen until you start hearing reality coming from Trump or the Secretary of State or anybody that reflects the reality on the battlefield and the history, the root causes, as Lavrov said, of how we got there. Until you hear this, an honest assessment that's accurate and factual, there will be zero, and this is all pantomime.
Well, Pat, that leads me exactly to where we are now with this silver bullet I was talking about. Let me make you hip to this bullet. He thinks he's this for a minute because it goes by so quickly. It's like, well, okay, yeah, Tomahawks. Listen to what he says. I just wanted to, I do this for myself too. I don't mean to be talking down to anybody in the audience or certainly not you.
No.
The front line can spark diplomacy. This is what he's looking forward to. Instead, Russia continues to do everything to weasel out of diplomacy. And as soon as the issue of long-range capabilities for us, for Ukraine, became less immediate, Russia's interest in diplomacy faded almost automatically. This signals that this very issue, the issue of our deep strike capabilities, may hold the indispensable key to peace. The greater Ukraine's long-range reach, the greater Russia's willingness to end the war. These weeks reaffirmed it. The discussion on Tomahawks turned out to be a major investment in diplomacy. We forced Russia to reveal that Tomahawks were precisely the card that they take seriously. There it is. This is a silver bullet. The threat of long-range capabilities, the threat of Tomahawks, that was what we've been looking for this whole war, Pat.
So Zelensky is basically pulling an Orwellian reverse. He's saying that the Tomahawks have forced Russia to the table diplomatically, but diplomacy's been canceled since the Tomahawk conversation came up. So what's this guy talking about? He is completely out of his mind, and he's been playing this actor's role for so long, from when he did the TV show that he was president, and then seamlessly became president from the television show Servant of the People. And I think he's clearly cracking, like the facade of playing this role as president, the wartime president, wearing the green outfits and whatnot. He's starting to crack now, and he doesn't make any sense. He's totally
You couldn't be more correct. And this gets even deeper, and the cracks are even further cracking. Let me show you. So that's what he said just yesterday. I want to back up a little bit. Now, this is Trump before they sat down and met. Zelensky's at the table. He's across the table. You don't see him from this clip here. But listen to how clear Trump was about the Tomahawks.
We need Tomahawks, and we need a lot of other things that we've been sending over the last 4 years to Ukraine. We've been, we gave them a lot. Now we have a different situation. We send it to the European Union. They pay for it and all that, and they have plenty of money. But it's beyond the money. We need Tomahawks, so we need a lot of other weapons that we're sending to Ukraine. One of the reasons we want to get this war over is exactly that. A lot of bad things can happen. Tomahawks are a big deal. But one thing I have to say, we want Tomahawks also. We don't want to be giving away things that we need.
We need. That was all from one conference. He had to repeat himself. I almost didn't cut it because he just kept repeating himself. And this is before he sat down with Zelensky. What do you call it when you preview something before it actually happens? He couldn't have been more clear.
Yeah, he was a little foreshadowing by Donald. That's probably the most honest thing that Trump has said, and maybe the most accurate thing that he's revealed in all of his throwaway comments and things like that.
And you know what's funny? It almost flies in the face of, how all the bravado that he loves to tout the strength of the military and how there is nothing that can stand up to our strength and power. Just had Doug McGregor on yesterday, and here's what he had to say about that whole issue about Trump's presence of mind regarding our stockpiles.
He doesn't read the material. He doesn't study it. And so you have to get in there and you have to sort of get his attention, which has recently happened, by the way, and tell him, look, these are the facts, boss. We don't have the 3 to 5 missiles per cell per launcher. We don't have that. So we can't go down this route. So stop promising these people. Stop threatening these people. It's a bad idea. That's a game that we're not positioned to win. Okay, that's good news. Thank goodness somebody got to him and pointed that out.
So I guess behind closed doors, the Riot Act was read to him, and he finally took hold of, wow, okay, maybe we don't have the power that I thought we had, that I hoped we had.
Yeah, because, look, if you're Washington you have to prioritize where your stock is going, and how it's going to be used, and who's going to be the beneficiary of that. In Israel, it comes ahead of the queue of Ukraine. So Ukraine gets sloppy seconds on stock. I don't know if I probably told this to you a couple weeks ago, but there's 8 Patriot missile batteries, which were original Iron Dome, because the Iron Dome is a U.S. system. It's not. It was just basically, the Iron Dome started out 30 years ago as an integrated array of U.S. Patriot missile systems. That was the Iron Dome, but it was branded in the media for Israel, and it was U.S. operated, U.S. technicians, U.S. staff. Everything was in the United States. The whole program was run out of Stuttgart, Germany, and it remained like that for years. And so Israel has since been trained, and they operate, I think most of it, but not all of it. Now they have a fully integrated missile defense array with different types of missiles for different altitudes and so forth. But they're giving the old 30-year batteries to Kiev. And they only delivered 1. They're supposed to deliver 7 more, but they have to be, maintained and probably some retrofitting and stuff like that. Sure. And so they're literally getting the sloppy of the sloppy seconds in Kiev. And so they just sent Raytheon and Lockheed just sent all of their top executive and team, maybe sales, I'm not sure. They went to Kiev and they gave a presentation about the Tomahawks and the missiles and so forth. And so that was in the Ukrainian press. So Yermak was there. There you go, right there.
Yeah, this was in D.C. also.
Yeah, exactly. So that what is this good for? This is just for show, and it's also for the share. It's good for the share prices of Lockheed Martin and Raytheon. Very good for them to show that they're basically going to be fulfilling some big order in the future. It's very good for their business. So, but when is it going to be fulfilled? Like, when are these missiles actually going to be delivered, if ever?
Well,
if ever.
Pat, you're missing the point. The money will be exchanged, Pat. Mm-hmm. Missiles are down the road. Let's keep the money going. Everybody's happy. We'll see the missiles whenever they get there.
And it's good for Zelensky. Look, he's there. He's getting the photo ops and stuff like that. Him and his chief of staff, Yermak, are still wearing all black when they go to. They had to change the. I mean, this is what fascists wear when they run around. He's totally out of mandate. He's not. He's now a black shirt president. He's not elected. He's completely out of mandate. I don't know how long he's been out of mandate. Well over a year now. There's no talk of any elections in Ukraine, and his chief of staff's basically like a thug sitting next to him. And there's probably some Nazis off camera that travel with him or whatever. But I mean, it's just a thug kind of dysfunctional regime with this sort of two-bit comedian as their head of state. I mean, the whole thing is you have to understand, how do you think Russia's viewing this whole vaudeville act?
Yeah.
That they're running between Trump and Zelensky, and the types of things that Donald Trump's tweeting out as well, the memes, and it's just not serious. I mean, like this week, Zelensky's in the doghouse. Last week, Putin was in the doghouse. The week before, Zelensky was in the doghouse. The week before that, Putin's in the doghouse. Then he's singing Putin's praises in Alaska. And since Alaska, they've flip-flopped probably about half a dozen times of who's in the good books and the bad books of Trump. I mean, Russia doesn't care anymore. They're just going to, Zelensky, that clip of Zelensky was very telling that you showed, okay? He wants Americans and the sort of idiotic Europeans, including the NATO Secretary General. These people are just not dealing. They're a few shrimp short of a Barbie, as the Australians would say. But Russia could, and he's talking about Russia's slow progress and all that. Russia could level Kiev in about a few hours at any time, and they could crush a lot of Ukraine's positions. And the reason they're not doing that is because Ukraine's been very strategic to use populations as human shields. And also, they've been very careful in their positioning because they know that Russia does not want to kill any civilians, especially in any of these regions that they might end up governing. And that's the reason, and that includes Kiev, by the way.
Yeah,
Russia's not out for civilian casualties like Israel. Look at how Israel prosecutes its, wars.
Yeah, quite different.
So Russia could. So if Zelensky's going to hit targets deep inside Russia, what's the last time he's done that? Twice. It's been a nightmare for Ukraine. They got pounded with Kinshaus and Oreshniks and Russian missiles and huge salvos, drone attacks, and so forth. The Ukraine can't withstand that. But it's not in Moscow's interest to inflict too much severe pain on the Ukrainian public because they know that's going to play in Zelensky's favor as the embattled, president standing up to Putin and all this other stuff. And Russia knows that that's not in their long-term interest because Russians view, and Americans will never understand this. Only the ones that have traveled to the region will really understand this. Is Russia regard Ukrainians as more or less Russians or cousins or siblings. Right. It's Kiev and Rus. It's the history of Russia is born in Kiev. It's their spiritual homeland. It's where the church and their holy institutions spring from, and so forth. They're not interested in a scorched earth situation in the way that the United States prosecutes scorched earth, or Israel prosecutes scorched earth when they do their sort of military actions. And Americans cannot understand this, and neither can the British, because the British and the Americans project their values and their warfare strategies on everybody else. Yeah. And they just can't understand that things are done differently in these different situations and why it's being done. You need to know why Russia does what it does, not what Russia's doing, which they don't even know in the West what Russia's doing because they're all marinated in their own propaganda and censorship regimes, but to understand why Russia does what it does. Yeah. And to do that, you have to listen and observe, and you actually have to understand short-term, medium, and long-term history. And we have a huge void in this type of understanding right now, right across the West, and that includes Donald Trump, probably the most clueless of all on all of these issues.
Getting back to the drama of these Tomahawks and the silver bullet that Zelensky thinks he has, let me again go back. When he left that meeting with Trump, he met outside with the press, and this is what he had to say.
Yeah, we spoke about the Tomahawks. I'm open with it. We want very much. Yes, and the president already, I think, that American side said that, look, we have to understand because we don't have, we need them. And this is the position of Americans that we don't have, we need them. And this is the position of Americans that...
So he was told by Trump, we don't have them, we need them. Okay? He looked him in the eye. So after saying it in the press conference that I played you several times, then behind closed doors, he said, we don't have them, okay? And on top of that, that's when he just came to the cameras yesterday, which is the very first clip I played you today, where, okay, Zelensky thinks, okay, it's the Tomahawks, it's the long-range missile capabilities, that's what's going to bury Putin. So you see how you said right after I played that for you, boy, there's cracks in the thinking here. Boy, is there cracks, right? And you said delusion. Boy, is there a delusion. How deep is it?
He's running out of. I think he's dug himself into such a hole, and a lot of these short term, like we need to. Putin only understands force, so we need more weapons to force the Russia to the table, kind of thing. Yeah. And they've been playing that sort of card for now a year and a half or so. Couple of years, and it'll be 3 years, this conflict in February of 2026, and that's not how it goes. They haven't forced, because Russia's position hasn't changed at all since they drafted that letter to Tony Blinken in December 2021. Before this thing started, and so it's more or less the same. It's changed a lot, and not in Ukraine's favor, and not in NATO's favor, because obviously Russia's increased its the territory that it controls. But it's that common sense that, a country like Russia, you're trying to provoke instability on their border, and then you're for 8 years you're shelling civilians in Donetsk, which the Ukrainian army, with NATO trainers, NATO specialists, and with arms from the U.S. and so forth, and they're killing thousands of civilians. And Russia's taking it on the chin. They're going through the UN Security Council. They're going through the proper processes internationally. They have agreements with Germany and France to guarantee that they're going to resolve this. And then we find out that the Europeans dragged their heels intentionally to give time to rearm the Ukrainian armed forces. Okay. And so at that point, Russia's looking at this military buildup on the Ukrainian side, so they have to make a quick decision in 2021, 2022. Are we going to allow this massacre to happen of ethnic Russians here, or are we going to intervene? And they did it, in accordance to international law, right? Because Donetsk and Lugansk declared independence, right. And under international law, you have to have a majority of your neighbors in standing to recognize your new state in order to have legitimacy as a new state. And Russia did recognize Donetsk and Lugansk, people's republics, and then they immediately had a referendum for accession to the Russian Federation, and it passed. Now, you might not like it. Americans might not like it. Europeans might not like that process. But according to international law, it was done by the books. Why? Because both of those oblasts were being targeted and were being murdered by their own government, and their own government raised their military, called them all terrorists in an anti-terror operation that Petro Poroshenko, the pro-U.S. president before Zelensky, called it an anti-terror operation.
Yeah, that Lavrov side I played earlier on, he referred to that the genocide that was occurring even before Zelensky took office at the time.
Yeah, I mean, it might be a strong word, genocide, and
that's that's Lavrov's word. By
you can debate that, but what they're saying is there was an intent to dehumanize, to make Russian language illegal, to then shut the people in the eastern Ukraine. They shut them out of the democratic process. That's a term, and politically the term is called lustration. Lustration. It means you declare parts of your population as persona non grata in the political sense, so they can't have quorum in Kiev, and they become terrorists. You raise a NATO-backed army, a NATO armed forces, to then go and attack them, killing 12,000 civilians over it's a civil war, basically. Yeah. And then so those people under international law have a right to defend themselves under Article 51 of the UN Charter, and they have a right to self-determination at that point. If they're being attacked and they have grievance, they have a right under Article 1 for self-determination. So it was all accordance to international law. So then the question comes here. Does the U.S. recognize international law? Does the U.S. recognize the UN Charter? Do any of the European NATO countries recognize any of that? Because they did when they voted unanimously for the Minsk peace process, Resolution 2202, Minsk 1 and 2. They recognize international law there. When does the UN Security Council ever get a unanimous vote on anything? When? Yeah. It did. That was the last time, and maybe the last time ever. I think there was abstentions as well. I'm not sure. I have to go back and look at it, but it was unanimous. And France and Germany were the guarantors that was going to happen. And it's more or less the same as the Istanbul Peace Agreement, which was agreed by Russia and Kiev at the end of March, early April 2022, after a month of fighting. And the U.S. and the British came barreling in to tell Zelensky, don't sign it, tear it up. We're going to give you weapons. We're going to turn this thing around. Don't worry, we've got your back. Yeah,
Boris Johnson, right?
Yeah. So that was more or less similar. I mean, that was such a good deal for Ukraine. I mean, they would have, they definitely should have taken that. But if they had implemented Minsk, they're not going to get Crimea back. And that's nominally Russian territory anyway. It was part of Russia before 1953. And it's full of Russians. And so they're not going to get Crimea back. That's a non-starter. But the statehood case for Donetsk and Lugansk and Crimea are much stronger than Kosovo. Much stronger. And guess what? How many of Kosovo's neighbors recognize them? Well, the most important one, of course, is Serbia. They of course don't recognize them as a state, but that's a NATO and a EU creation, and it was done so at the barrel of a gun. The case of the Eastern Ukrainian People's Republics that became part of the Russian Federation, by the letter, if you go, and there's a number of great legal analysis been done by this. We published some of it at 21st Century Wire, but there's the case for statehood and independence. It's very, very strong in international law. If you believe in international law, that's the problem. That's the problem. Is we only apply international law in the United States or Britain or NATO countries when it suits our strategic objectives, and if it doesn't, we just discard it. I mean, Israel and Gaza is a perfect example. You know, where are the sanctions on Israel? None, nothing. And it's the most brutal, most violent, most disgusting display of military force against civilians in modern history, and there's no sanctions against Israel. You know, so that shows you what a farce and a double standard it is. And it's not China and Russia applying the double standard; it's the United States and its allies.
And there will be no comeuppance, right? There's not going to be any comeuppance. I mean,
there will be, but it's going to come slowly and in different ways.
In our lifetime.
Well, it depends how you define comeuppance.
Yeah.
But the economic and political alienation, I think, is a real danger for the U.S. And for its allies. Europe is already suffering in this regard. I mean, it's funny that China just overtook Germany. I'm sorry, China just overtook the United States as the number one import partner for Germany.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So what's going to happen when they start sanctioning China and blocking Chinese goods? Then what? The price of everything just goes up.
They're meeting soon, right? In the next, very soon. I don't know when. Another
example, Colombia. Trump is threatening tariffs to punish Colombia for this supposed drug policy.
Yeah, you wanted to talk, Patrick, about some of the rumblings going on in South America. Tell us.
Yeah, so the Venezuela charade it completely was a debacle, and using our Pentagon to hit fishing boats. And then they repatriated the survivors to Colombia and Ecuador, I think, and they didn't.
Are they ever going to come clean? You know, I thought the White House said, "Where's the transparency here?" They're pretty good with the transparency otherwise, in many cases, not all cases, but they are. But there's like zero transparency in this.
There'll be nothing. There'll be nothing because the boat the one in the Caribbean they hit, one of the recent ones, doesn't have any Venezuelan person involved in it. So then the talking point is from Marco Rubio and co. in the press that are just trying to cover for Trump is, oh, they're linked to Maduro. You know, they're creating this myth that Venezuela is a narco state and they're somehow responsible for the drug problem in the United States. And then Pentagon just hit a boat in the Pacific, so now they're taking shots in the Pacific.
Yeah, the submarine, today. Right? The submarine. They're claiming it's a submarine.
I'm not sure, but I think it was a fishing boat or a drug. They're claiming it was drug. Maybe it was submarine. I don't know, but. So this is being completely done extrajudiciously, no due process. And normally, if you're really serious about this, you'd want to be working with the Mexican authorities or whoever the local. And the U.S. had a good relationship with Colombia. I mean, they are the number 3, I think, or number 4 recipient of U.S. military aid in the world, behind Israel, Egypt, and maybe one other country. They might even be number 3.
I didn't know that.
And so that was done for a reason by previous administrations. Now, I'm not a fan of this policy of U.S. military aid, but they wanted to do this to guarantee they would keep a left-wing government from coming into power, or too much of a left-wing government coming into power in Colombia, and they don't want to see this left-wing socialist domino effect in South America, which could happen at any moment. So this has always been U.S. policy from Henry Kissinger till before Henry Kissinger, right till the present day. But the reason they want to punish Colombia is twofold, and one of them is because of their strident stance against Israel at the United Nations. And so, but they're using the excuse that they're not doing enough to stop the drugs coming into the United States. You know, one of the biggest problems with the proliferation of narcotics and the use of narcotics in the United States is the incredible wealth gap, and the fact that they are cooking the books on unemployment, using gig economy to pad the stats. I mean, the last administration did this to great perfection, the Biden administration, and Trump's team is doing basically the same thing, because there's two stats that no U.S. Administration ever wants to own, whether it's a Democrat or Republican, doesn't matter. One is inflation, and they cook the CPI. The inflation in America is horrendous. It's horrendous right across the board. Anyone who lives there knows that, but depending on what party you support, nobody wants to admit it. The other is unemployment. Those are two statistics historically that no government in any country, especially the United States, wants to own or to give a realistic account of. And so this is one of the reasons why there's a fentanyl crisis. This is one of the reasons why there's a narcotics crisis, because people cannot afford the basics in the United States, and so many people have fallen below the line and through the cracks, more so than probably any other time we're looking at now in comparisons to, you know, the 1960s and some of the inner city deprivation of the Great Lyndon Johnson's Great Society in the 1970s, and the sort of crime you saw in these places during that period, which some of us are older enough to remember that, or at least remember reportage of it. But you can go look it up if you don't remember. But we have the same type of situation now. And what's the appeal to drugs in America? Why is there so much appeal? Is it because people have completely checked out of politics? And the reason they're checking out of politics is because of the corruption and the sort of not serious and hyper partisan and completely lack of any transparency, the institutional corruption politically that you have in Washington right now. I think it's at an all-time high. And I'll throw Russiagate in there, 10 years of fake Russian conspiracy theories that ruined and broke our political system, and just the dysfunctionality of government. People, the polling looks at people don't trust the government, they don't approve of the government, all-time lows. Presidents are all-time low. That's just a reflection of where society is at. And these people in power are not doing anything to address the fundamentals. And they're just kicking the can down the road and saying, "Oh, free market." And they'll. I'm sorry to go on a rant here, Gary, but they'll bring Javier Milei, this clown of a president in Argentina, parade him around Washington at the inauguration. Elon Musk running around with a chainsaw at CPAC with Milei, and before he even did anything, he was lauded by the Trump administration, Musk, and the right-wing press as being this person who saved Argentina with libertarian, miracle, whatever. He's clawing back a $40 billion bailout from Trump, and Trump is now using it to the midterms are coming up, and Milei will likely lose. So Trump is dangling more money and more aid over the Argentinian public, saying, "I won't give any more money unless Milei wins the midterms." That is direct electioneering on a scale that's just so blatantly obvious. And so, like, that's the miracle of Milei, whatever. So because he's seen as an ally, then this is all fair game for Trump, because Trump doesn't care about the ethics, the optics, or the fact that it's probably not going to help that country anyway. But what about America first? But that was supposed to be the success story in South America, and it's a total failure. Milei is a failure. He ran a crypto scam, which he was investigated by his own Justice Department for running, for pumping and dumping a meme coin. That was earlier, I believe, early in the year. And that's embarrassing. But then again, Donald Trump's pumping meme coins, the Trump coin, the Melania coin. This is just, it just degrades the office of president. And it's hard for people to take the political leadership seriously when they're doing this type of stuff. And if you compare that to previous governments, administrations are far from perfect, but they didn't engage in that level of sort of depravity in terms of not caring about optics anymore. That's corruption. And then, so, I mean, I could go on and on. But the South American thing is just emblematic of creating a fake phantom menace in Venezuela and then openly saying that you want to take their oil and resources. And they're positioning themselves right now. The Trump administration is beating the drums for a military confrontation with Venezuela. What's Venezuela done to the U.S.? Nothing. They're making up a fake drug story with Maduro to justify some kind of aggression. I mean, this is like peak. I mean, Bush couldn't even get away with this during the height of the neocon era. This is Donald Trump is it will be by the time this year's up, he will have started more new wars, and it will be the most neocon administration in history in the United States. And this is a guy that ran on, we're going to stop all the new wars and we're not America first and all this other stuff. They've been throwing money around the world for Israel, for Ukraine, for Argentina, and starting more wars in the last, it's only been 10 months. I mean, this guy got nominated by Benjamin Netanyahu for a Nobel Peace Prize. I mean, right. Listen, Mel Brooks couldn't make up a better skit than this. It's just, it's so ridiculous and stupid. I honestly, listen, it gets worse. The Pentagon put out a directive to the press that all of their reporting about the Pentagon, Pete Hegseth and all that, and what the U.S. is doing militarily needs to be reviewed and okayed by the Pentagon itself. And so there was a massive walkout. This is just this week of all these mainstream media outlets, and they're basically saying, no, we can't do that. That's what you do in China or in the Soviet Union. We're not going to do that. They walked out. And so the Pentagon, rather than have a come to Jesus moment about why they're sliding into fascism here, they then go and approach the Gateway Pundit, the Post-Millennial, Human Events, One America News. I think One America News, all these people are willing to sign this new restriction on reporting. So what happened to American democracy and freedom of the press? I mean, this is Donald Trump. I mean, do people realize this? Even under Bush, we had embedded reporting in Iraq, but that was out in the field. That was on location. You were free to report the Pentagon, go to press briefings in Washington and so forth, the DOD, Defense Secretary, etc. You're free to say and report anything you want, whatever you glean from those events. What is this all about? I mean, so it's a control issue. They want control of the press. They want control of the narrative. They want control of the optics. And that is a sign of a very insecure government, and one that is doing a terrible job and probably presiding over massive corruption. Imagine if there was a backhand corruption scandal at the Pentagon, and what the press has to run that by the Pentagon of how they're going to talk about that. This opens the door to just untold corruption without the Fourth Estate there as a check and a balance. The press is mentioned in our Declaration of Independence, our Constitution. Yeah. It's explicit in the United States. Trump is rolling that back. And you're talking to someone who's nominally conservative here, okay? I defended Trump for the last 10 years against lawfare, against the Russiagate hoax and so forth. And I'm dead serious I would never use the word fascism lightly, but that's exactly what this is. When are people going to wake up? And where are the Democrats? Where's the Democrat opposition on this? Like real opposition? What happened? Did they shoot their load already on Russiagate?
Yeah,
is there anything left?
This is so under the radar. I mean, it's made a couple of headlines, but you would think it would be a bigger issue as to the your
this is huge.
Here explaining the danger of us not being able to hold their feet to the fire.
This cuts to the core of the U.S. political system of checks and balances.
The reason why it's the First Amendment.
This fundamental. That should be a number one story. It gets a passing mention by the Washington Post, and it's getting some coverage the last 24 hours. But some of these websites that they're giving accreditation to, like, no offense, but these are just political MAGA sites, and who traffic in, and most of the stuff they cover is anti-woke, Portland riots, or just culture war stuff. And, occasionally you might find an informative article there, but they're not national security, foreign policy publications. And they're hugely biased towards Trump. So he's just going to, stack the press corps with all pro-MAGA websites?
Not cool.
I mean, does that represent the interests of the United States and 330 million people living there? I don't think so. No. That's just my opinion. I could be wrong. Maybe I misread the Constitution. I'll have to go back and read it again. Well,
let's hope that doesn't stay in place, and that the coverage doesn't become watered down like that, or even like eliminated. Eliminated, basically, is what's going on. That is such a red line. Yeah.
Imagine look, I'm sorry, but we go and attack other countries that do this, and they say, look what the Russians or the Chinese did, or the North Koreans. They won't allow the press to report on their military activities, and that's authoritarianism. And actually, we may need to invade them to sort of set them straight, or whatever. You're doing it in Washington right now, openly. And the guy who's the head of the department, I'm sorry to point this out again, only a year ago was a second-rate Fox News weekend host, Pete Hegseth. And Gary, if you took all the most qualified people that were more qualified than him, I could stack you 100,000 resumes on top, and Pete's would be at the bottom. And he is in charge of $1 trillion a year Pentagon, and he's doing stuff like this, restricting press coverage. I mean, that's underqualified is one thing. Major reservist Pete Hegseth, who was a guard at Guantanamo Bay, maybe he did a couple of other tours. That's bad enough. But you want to attack and restrict the press and make them run their reports through you for to be approved before they get published? Are you kidding me? That means that you must be up to no good at the Pentagon. That's what that means. There's going to be a reckoning. The backlash should be fierce. I'm just waiting to hear the opposition. Is there a viable opposition in Washington to this? That's a question.
The restrictions being put on the press, that's outrageous. I think part of what was going on with why he's in place, Hegseth and, many others, is that my take on it is that Trump is really, when he was assembling his team and putting people in place, he was looking more than anything else is to have someone he could trust. And because of what happened in his first administration. So he looked to people for loyalty. I think that was probably, the number one priority. And then beyond that, so that's where the most highly qualified wasn't the top priority. The top priority was loyalty. Now, if you're going to be loyal to me, then I can trust you. And then there's not going to be the backstabbing that happened during the first administration. That's what I think a lot. Yeah. That's why I think a lot of people got put in the place that they did.
That's exactly correct, Gary. Trump cannot have anybody that is more qualified than him that has any gravitas at all. Real gravitas based on your achievements or authority and credibility, because that's a direct threat to Donald Trump, because he runs a sort of pyramid management hierarchy style.
So now what we have to hope is what Doug McGregor was telling us earlier in the show, is that people are going to finally get to him. Now, can they get to him before too much damage is done?
Well, Yeah, look, on the cabinet thing, and we now know, I was saying this from the beginning, that anybody who is involved or touches foreign policy or national security, they were shortlisted by the transition team, and those names were provided by Benjamin Netanyahu's office and Miriam Adelson. So that loyalty to Israel first, that's why, Gary, they're making a balls up of the Ukraine situation, because that's second priority. They don't have anybody that's capable of dealing in any meaningful way with that situation, because the number one priority for the State Department, for the national security team, is Israel. And Ukraine is a side hustle. It's a side hustle for Steve Witkoff. And you can tell because he couldn't even name the Donbass regions. I mean, so it's a side thing. It's not a number one priority, but geopolitically, it is probably the most important and consequential for the United States and its European partners in the future of NATO. But it's left to stew on the side burner. And they don't actually know what they're doing, nor do they care. Pete Hegseth the Israeli lobby loved him because he went to Tel Aviv and proselytized for the Third Temple and all the real extremist Zionist stuff. And being young and having no real qualifications for the job, he's actually the perfect person as a puppet. And that's exactly what you've got there. You've got a puppet. And they've done everything you could possibly do to destabilize the Middle East more, and then try to paint it as some peace through strength gambit. I mean, it's kind of a joke. The adults are not in the room here. Yeah, that's the problem.
When you heard Trump, he repeatedly says, he still is saying that the bombing of Iran is really what made it all possible. What's happening, the supposed a peace deal that's in place now. It wouldn't have happened unless there was the bombing of Iran.
Is that peace in Gaza?
Yeah. That
sort of flat hellscape where they've destroyed all of the habitable. Yeah. And the latest academic study is 680,000 dead, missing, and excess deaths in Gaza since this October 7th. 680,000. Okay. That's the latest academic study that was published in the global media. That was also endorsed by the UN Special Rapporteur. So it's much more than 60,000 from direct munition killed or whatever.
Right.
And is that peace? Is that peace? Peace is what? Submission and then annihilation, and then you can sit there like waving the flag that's peace. I mean, that's kind of ridiculous. I can't believe they actually get away with this. Donald Trump's brought peace. He's brought peace nowhere. Donald Trump has brought peace nowhere. And they want to start another war against Iran before Christmas or after Christmas. There's going to be a retaliation from the Iranians, and it's going to hit Israel and maybe U.S. targets in the region. And then what? You're going to escalate, Pete? Donald, you're going to drop a nuke on Tehran? So you want to start a war and then you want to drop a nuke to finish it, is what you're saying. And that's exactly what they're inferring, or Israel drops a nuke or whatever. Yeah. Where's the world going to be at that point? Everyone's going to bow down and submit to the United States and the almighty and great and Pentagon? Really? Is that how it's going to go? Or are we going into a dark chapter in human history here? That's the legit question that a lot of people have.
Yeah, indeed. Well, nothing's being walked back yet, but boy, who knows what we're walking into.
Exactly.
And
it's unnecessary. All of this is unnecessary. All of this could be avoided with honest, skillful diplomacy and leaders talking to each other and working these things out in a responsible and a mutually beneficial way. All of this could be avoided. All of it. And adhering to actual international law. That would probably help. But none of that is happening under this administration.
Not yet. Well, man, we will be there, and I know you'll be there, and we want you there with us, Patrick.
I hope so.
This was a great discussion. We covered a lot of stuff here, and it was just appreciate all your passion and all your input.
Thanks, Gary.
Right.
Great to talk to you.
Make sure you got to check out Patrick. He does a lot more than what you just saw here. You got to go to his X account, obviously. He's the host of Sunday Wire. And certainly go out to his Substack, which is at patrickhenningsen.substack.com. We thank you guys so much. Unintimidated, uncompromised. We'll see you next time.